Please consider becoming a patron of Myth Vision Podcast. You'll get early access to every video, including this amazing one, and you can ask me personal questions, private message me, anything you'd like. Professor Elaine Pagels, you wrote a book called Why Religion? Can you tell us about it?
Yes. The title, somebody said, why religion? Because many people say to me, why do you do religion? I mean, that's weird. And I was then married to a physicist, wonderful elementary particle physicist, and his friends thought it was crazy. I mean, study religion? Who would do that? In fact, even when I first went out on a date with this very good-looking guy, he said, why religion? Why don't you write about something that has impact in the real world? And I said to him, so why do you study elementary particles? You know, I mean, you can't even see them. I mean, and we both realized we were trying to understand something fundamental about the world we live in. And he was looking at the natural world, and I was looking at the cultural world. So anyway, we had a great marriage until his death 22 years later. It was great. So that was a question. But also somebody said to me, well, you wrote a book called Why Religion, but you don't answer the question. And I wanted to say, well, no, it's a thematic question. Because I grew up in a family, you know, in which was sort of Protestant, but it didn't matter. It wasn't a big deal. It was not a serious part of our life. It was kind of boring, church. Didn't matter much. So who needs religion? My father gave it all up for Darwin. And he thought it was just foolish old folktales. So who needs it? So I become a scholar studying it. Why? Well, because at a certain point in my life, when I was 14 or 15, I went to this Billy Graham crusade, not even knowing what it was. I was just going along with some people who were going to something in San Francisco that sounded like a big deal. And this preacher was talking, very powerful. He's talking about America and the flaws of this country. I had never heard anyone talk that way. My family were very patriotic. My grandparents were immigrants from Holland and Switzerland. But he also talked about you can have a new life, you can be born again, you can have a new family. And I was 14, it's just the time when you want to break out, you know? And I thought, wow, that's great, I love that. So I went, and I was very moved by what he said, and by the music, and the emotional power of 18,000 people in the sports stadium singing Just As I Am. It was a powerful come to Jesus moment, literally. And I did. And I joined an evangelical church. My parents were horrified. What? But I felt that I'd found something very powerful and important. And it was a very deep part of my life for quite a while. It opened up kind of, you could say, the imagination, but the idea and the recognition of a spiritual life that I didn't even know existed, and I was told didn't exist. And I needed it. Some of us do. So I went with that, and then a year later I had to leave that church. Maybe we should...
You told me, yeah, you kind of told me that they were like, your Jewish friend is going to hell because they didn't believe in Jesus. So you were like, I don't, are you kidding me? You know, like, absolutely not. Like, that's not something you believe in. And that's what led you to say, I'm out of this. I can't.
I was so shocked when they said, your friend, he wasn't born again, he's Jewish, he's going to hell. He'd just been killed in an automobile accident. I just felt like I'd been socked in the stomach. And I thought, wait a minute, I thought this was about love. That's what Billy Graham preached.
Right.
Now they're telling me he's Jewish. Wasn't Jesus Jewish? Didn't seem to matter. I just felt shocked. And I just said, something here is really wrong. And I walked out of there utterly desolated and feeling terribly lonely. And I never went back.
And that changed your path in terms of the direction you were going to live your spiritual life as. See, something that I was going to ask you in the light of the title, like why religion? For me, I see why it serves a purpose, and I see why it gives lots of people meaning. Various different versions of religions across the world give people meaning. It's been giving them meaning for thousands of years, probably more than that. Who knows how far back? Versions of forms, I guess if we wouldn't call it religion, but in some forms of worship or something has been going on.
Different traditions and gods and goddesses and spiritual beings they talk about.
Right. And so it's played a serious part of our evolutionary process. And so are we supposed to just get rid of it because there's been a lot of harms done in the name of religion? I mean, not necessarily. Also, do we need to make everyone come to believe in religions and that they need to practice them? I don't think so. I think that would be wrong to do either or. And I think you would also agree with me on that in the why religions, because I'm personally an atheist by definition. Call me a spiritual atheist, someone who sees the practical applications of why maybe structural religion is important or was important, at least for the longest, and it still plays a significant part of being important. For example, the moral compass and the structure of how society should be run and how people should act. Religion's played a huge part in how to construct one's lifestyles, how to act, how to be. And I'd love to see a world where it wasn't like you had to have these things, everyone knew what they were doing, which is a utopian world, of course, that isn't here. But what would you say to someone like me who, this is outside of your book, so to speak, but it's like someone like me who understands the mind of a believer, who was extremely devout, who was there like the evangelical, who left that, didn't go to a liberal Christianity, if you will, but went more like, okay, God's bigger, but then eventually starts to look to the natural world and says, all of the experiences that are explained subjectively in one's own conscience, one's own mind and body, might have natural causes, but doesn't take away its meaning. Whereas you might say it on the flip coin and say, okay, sure, there's chemicals happening, but it's a spiritual thing taking place. Where I flip it the other way around. I think it's the opposite, but we both serve a purpose here.
Yeah, and I can totally understand that. I mean, I just said, I'm out of here. I don't believe this stuff. And so I left for a long time, but about 4 years later, I kept thinking, there's something about the experience that really was powerful, that opened something up that had been shut off.
Right.
And it wasn't about what I believed as much as the sense of the possibility of spiritual understanding. Maybe something like what you're talking about. So I decided, okay, well, I'd like to find out, what do we really know about Jesus of Nazareth? What do we know historically? What if we just strip away all of the belief stuff and say, what can we find out? Right? That's kind of what you're doing.
Right.
So I went to graduate school, and I went to a school that was secular so that I wouldn't get brainwashed. And I wanted to find out, what do we know about Jesus? And the first thing I found out is, well, the earliest written sources we have are written a long time after Jesus. So there's a lot we don't know about who wrote them and how accurate they are and all of that. And then I discovered there were all these secret gospels that I had no idea existed. And that was really fascinating. And actually, they, and the Gospel of Mark, which I also love, spoke to me on some level that's hard to articulate. So I was kind of fascinated, and not only saying, this is an important part of culture, but this is something that I engage, And I'm sort of more of a explorer than a believer.
Right.
But I also kind of love these traditions, although some of them I think we have to discard, like Christian anti-Semitism. certain kinds of elements of Christian traditions that are not in the service of its best impulses.
I think what I like about what you say and what you're writing on is that you love you. You found yourself. You found what works for you, what makes you happy, and what so when you use the word, for example, spiritual life, right? I feel like I found that 6 years ago when I got clean off drugs. Yes. However, I define it differently.
Yes.
In this abstract philosophical sense, yes, there's this mind concept of like, you know, I could break things down into like, okay, this process of serotonin released with this chemical and that's all natural processes. But the way I perceived it was narrative-wise. It had impact, it had value, it had meaning, it gave me a sensation, it gave me, I had it. That I will call spiritual experience, even if I do say the natural world is what gave that to me as a creature of this world. But what I like about where you come from too, that I think I share with you, is that we all come from this universe. We come from this bigger picture we can't wrap our heads quite around. Even though I think this biasly, not knowing with certainty, the same way I wouldn't know that with certainty Jesus existed or anything else, I feel like maybe there's a natural explanation to all things, and it's beyond our comprehension. Whereas someone else might go, well, we don't know, and that's why I think there's a God and there's a bigger picture. Me, I think maybe there isn't a God, right? But my experience and this story that's in my head is the one that matters, right? And I want it to be something other people experience. I want them to find themselves too. I don't want you to have to go to a building to figure it out and go through a ritual mantra and it doesn't do anything for you. Just like a lot of the prophets seem to say, your sacrifices are nothing. Stop. Because you're not pious. You're not living a life true to being a good person or whatever. You know what I mean?
I do. I mean, like you, I want to know, what do we actually know historically? What's the evidence? I don't see a dichotomy between historical scientific interpretation of the world and what I think of as the spiritual imagination, which gives rise to our stories. I don't see these as opposites. I mean, when you talk about stories, it's the way we interpret the universe, what we know and what we don't, and there's a lot we don't know. So I feel very in tune with what you're saying, because I'm not interested in believing a bunch of things so much as how we treat each other. I mean, you talked about these traditions, and I was teaching a course this year with my colleague Jonathan Gold. He's Jewish, but he doesn't practice Judaism. He's been fascinated by Buddhism his whole life, and he's a specialist in Tibetan Buddhism, and he practices Buddhist meditation. And so we taught a course that I asked him, hey, how about this? I don't know much about Buddhism, but I'd like to know more, and you don't know much about Christianity. He said, I don't know much. Well, fine. So why don't we do a course, we'll call it Jesus and Buddha, and we'll compare them and just see what we come up with. We'll learn from each other. So he said, great, let's do it. So we've taught a course called Jesus and Buddha at Princeton.
Wow.
And we looked at the life of the founder, the stories about the birth of the Buddha, the stories about which happened supposedly 300 or 400 years before the birth of Jesus, stories about the birth of Jesus, stories about how did the Buddha become the Buddha? What does it mean that he became enlightened? How did Jesus of Nazareth become the Christ? The story is about the baptism, when the Spirit comes upon him, right? And then what did he teach? What did each man teach? What kind of group did he gather? What did he teach them about how they should act? And we found out that they have very different views about lifetime and time and space and cosmology and the afterlife and angels and demons and all kinds of things. They're really different universes. But really where they came together, Derek, was in how should you act? How should I act? And then you look at the Sermon on the Mount and it says, Jesus says, well, God's judgment is coming. And what you must do in the judgment is you must, give to people what you want to get from God. Luke says what you will get in the judgment is what you give. So be generous, be forgiving, be over generous, give more than you can afford, and God will be generous and pour into your lap all sorts of blessings. But if you judge people, and if you hate them, and if you retaliate negatively, that's what will happen to you in the judgment, right? That's the Sermon on the Mount in Luke and Matthew. It's Matthew 5 and it's Luke 7, 6 and 7. That's the heart of the gospel there, right? Do unto others as you would have them do unto you, and so forth. The heart of Buddhism is the law of karma. And it says, if you harm others, you will be harmed. It will come back to you. If you give to others, what you give will return to you. So what happens to you depends on what you do, your choice. Are you generous? Are you kind? Are you compassionate? Are you hateful and vindictive? And do you steal? Do you rob? Do you cheat? If you do, that is how your life will come back to you. Mm-hmm. That's karma. Because your actions create what happens to you. And that's exactly what the judgment says. In a very different cosmological framework. Mm-hmm. God is, the day of judgment is the imaginative context. But the principle is the same. And I think that principle works. And that we thought is, hey, when it comes to that, Jesus and Buddha are teaching something very similar. And that matters to me. Because I think the way we treat other people is perhaps the most important thing in our lives. It is the most important things.
I'm not sure I can add anything to that because I think I agree 100%. There's nothing obviously I wasn't going to be disagreeing anyway, but that was well said. I agree. And I think people feel that satisfaction when they look after another person. I know I do. When someone's hurting or in need and I can help, that's why I defend people who are being bullied. Even if I disagree with their conclusions on things, like, why would I want to hurt you? I used to say this when I got clean off drugs. There's certain parables and certain philosophical sayings that have a narrative, that have meaning. And I'd always say, if you want to clean your own sins, if you could use the term, depending on whatever worldview you come from, and don't take, sometimes that triggers some people, right? The word sin might trigger them. But what I'm saying...
Or just the wrong things you've done,
Right. And I say, if you want to clean the dirty face, you can go to the mirror. But the crazy thing about life is you don't clean your own face. You go to the mirror and you clean the face off the mirror and your face gets clean. People are a reflection of you. And so when you go and you actually help another person, you're actually cleaning your own face. The way that you help yourself is to go and help another individual because they are you. And to me, it's really wild, but it kind of goes into that whole teaching, love the Lord thy God with all thy heart, with all thy mind, with everything that's in you. What's the next greatest commandment? Love your neighbor as you love yourself. So the way I understood that, and I still apply the principle, right, is that I'm going to love you the way I love me. It's the greatest thing I can do. There's nothing better that I can do than to try and love you as a human being the way I love myself, and to show you that you matter, no matter what you think, your abstract ideas, your thoughts, doesn't matter. I want to show you that I love you. And that's what keeps me clean off drugs. That's what actually saved my life. It was not this do you believe, hold on, is it the Trinity or not? Do you believe in the Trinity or not? Get out of here.
See, those things about the Trinity and how you put that together, that's really an intellectual kind of construct. Mm-hmm. That doesn't reach to the heart.
Right.
And you're talking about actions that transform you.
Right.
About
character.
About how what you choose to do will either destroy you or bring you, blessings, I guess you could call it. Right?
it's funny because I may not use that terminology, but that's exactly what the terminology is to a Christian. And for me, it's like, yes, in a sense, it brings me goodwill. It brings me happiness and joy. It makes me feel good. I literally get a physical sensation out of helping someone else.
Of course.
So in the natural sense, it gives me everything I need, and there's a sense
So you see, that is how I see the spiritual life. And if you look at, and I've been asking myself, Derek, how is it that these stories of Jesus have legs? I mean, there's all kinds of stories about Zeus, and there's stories about Prometheus, and there's stories about Hercules, there's stories about Gilgamesh. I mean, look, the world is full of folk tales, right? But that is not the heart of these traditions. I mean, what you're talking about, this message about what Jesus says, love your neighbor as you love yourself, or Luke literally says what you give is what you get from God. What you give to others is what you get from God. That's how he puts it. Mm-hmm. And that transforms people's lives. I mean, you've seen people like Leon Tolstoy, the great novelist, when he fell into a deep depression in his 50s after he had everything. He was wealthy, he was famous, he was successful, he had a big family, he had everything a man could want and everything he'd always wanted. And he was depressed and was afraid he would kill himself. And the way he came out of it was by a sense of coming toward God. Now, it was not a conventional conversion. He couldn't go to belong to the Russian church. He said, I don't believe all that stuff. But it was some other internal process that saved his life and transformed him. And many other people, too, have been changed by these kinds of recognition of this is how we need to act. So that is very powerful.
It is. There's so much more to this, but thank you.